childhood consisted of a variety of media genres. Growing up with a slightly older brother meant that not only was I well immersed in the lore of My Little Pony and the main six, but I also had an intense knowledge of the Call of Duty perk system and the different races that make up the Covenant. A lot of our interests were shared, but there were some that we kept to ourselves. I had one particular interest that I've managed to hold on to over the years: Marvel. I grew up reading any of the comics I could find in the library or as contraband sold at my school. I watched the first phase of Marvel as soon as it came out, even though my age hadn't even hit double digits. The many television shows were always playing on the TV after school whenever it was my turn to have the remote. Anything I could get my hands on, I got my hands on. My interest in Marvel never left despite the MCU going to shit. I enjoyed some of the Spider-Man games that came out as time went on, but I eventually transitioned away from Marvel. I started playing games like Valorant and Apex Legends, and eventually got back into Overwatch when the sequel came out. Unfortunately, the games I've been playing have become boring and repetitive. I didn't find the same joy that I had playing the games when I first started, and it was about time that I started looking for something new. So when I heard a couple months ago that a new 6v6 game was in development, I was curious. I didn't know exactly what it was at the time, and I looked into it. That game was Marvel Rivals. Hi again, guys, and recently, Marvel Rivals has released their first ever public version of the game. Now that the game is out of alpha and beta testing, my interest in Marvel came back with a vengeance. Considering the fact that I got a little excited every time Rogue appeared on my TV screen, I was absolutely ready to burst when this game finally released on Steam. So of course, I played the game, and I wanted to share with you my experiences, as well as my thoughts and opinions on what I've seen so far. And trust me when I say that all of the dick riding that I do isn't simply me glazing the game, but rather it's well-deserved praise that this game has squeezed out of me. If you like this video, there will be a card at the end that takes you to one just like it. The game's origins began, as all things tend to, with Doctor Doom. More specifically, two versions of Doom. The current and 2099 variant created a catastrophic event known as the Time Stream Entanglement, where multiple timelines were fused together. These timelines became known as the Chronoverses, which include different variations of the current Marvel characters that we know and love. Some have ambitions with the Chronoverses, using it to boost their own gains and create something bigger for themselves. However, most of the characters want to return their universes to their normal state. The people who want the universe's return to normal are doing their best to work on solutions. The Avengers have turned their base into a stronghold for others, while Iron Man uses a new element, Chronovium, to try and reverse the entanglement. Doctor Strange, while trapped in the mirror dimension most of the time, works with Scarlet Witch and her chaos magic to keep the realities from crashing in on themselves, all the while Spider-Man and the other web-slingers do their best to protect the web of life and destiny from Doom's forces. I've got to be completely honest. They cooked with this backstory. The characters are very well written because the devs already used the pre-existing personalities and ambitions of the characters to create their personalities in the game. They kept rivalries alive while keeping the characters' varying levels of charisma accurate and loyal to other media source variants. While these characters may not be the ones you know from the comics or movies, they share too many similarities to be completely different people. I like how Doctor Doom is also getting a good role in the game without being a playable character yet. I feel like people who are only interested in the MCU don't know anything about Doctor Doom, but he's the cause of like 99.9% of the world's problems no matter what universe he's in. He's out there causing trouble and trying to further his own ambitions, just as he always does, and this time he got multiple realities stuck in this very bad situation. I feel like a lot of media sources underutilize Doom just because he's a character that hasn't been relevant in a long time. To me, it makes sense that Doom is one of the big bads of this universe because he's a nefarious little shit. I think that in the MCU, Ultron and Thanos were great villains, and I think their ideologies would be something that would be super interesting to see in game. But I don't think those characters carry the same ambitions when it comes to what's happening in the game's lore. Doctor Doom is someone who loves messing with the multiverses, because again, he's a little shitbag. This makes Doom the best choice as the big villain who created this mess. I don't think they could have picked a better villain from the comics, and I love that Doom is finally being utilized to his full potential. Also, he's hot, so there's that. If I had a hard-on for every single time I saw a masked man wearing a set of green armor, I'd have 2 hard-ons, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Another thing is that each individual character has their own backstory as to why they exist in this universe. You can actually access that by navigating to the lore page of a hero's profile and clicking on one of the 3 stories that are under the lore tab. Currently, as I'm making this video, only one has been released for each character. There you will find a page that explains how the characters got into this situation. That's another thing that I really like about this game and its lore. The characters and the reasons for their appearances are fleshed out really well, and they're described in a story-like manner that is not only engaging, but also really well written. It beats a lot of other things, such as a sudden lore drop in dialogue or a boring TLDR of how everyone got here, written like a really shitty book summary. When you first start up the game, you are treated to it preparing its shaders before giving you a little epilepsy warning. You know, just in case you're scared of epilogues. Once that's done, the game opens up with a nice cinematic that leads you right from the startup screen to the main menu. But before you can hop into any game mode, you have to undergo a brief tutorial to introduce you to the game. The tutorial is pretty quick and easy, and gets you used to the basic mechanics of the game. I think there could have been a little more to the tutorial, but I like that it doesn't take up much of your time with unnecessary topics or information. It's right to the point and gets you in and out so you can get to playing the game faster. You play as the Punisher, and you quickly make your way through the instructions that Galactic gives you. You practice basic movement and using your weapon. It also goes over the ping system, showing all the pings you can do. You also become aware of some game mechanics that were not previously mentioned, such as the universal chronovision ability. And finally, it gets into ability and ultimate usage. Overall, the tutorial probably takes about 2 or so minutes to complete. It doesn't get overly specific with certain characters, similar to how a lot of other games only have you play one character and move on. However, there are character-specific tutorials that you can go through after you complete the main tutorial. I didn't check those out for a while, but I have to say that they're pretty good at giving the basics of what the character does. The tutorial was pretty great though, and it didn't take long for me to get past the basics and move on to the real fun. Before I even knew it, it was time for me to queue up my first game. I was so excited and could barely contain my hype. So as everyone started locking in their characters, locking in my Pookie's Widow before she even had the chance, I made the surprising choice of locking in Cloak and Dagger for my first game. It was unexpected, but my options were limited to either Scarlet Witch, Squirrel Girl, or Cloak and Dagger since Jeff was already taken. And to save my Pookie the burden of playing a strategist, I made the sacrifice. But we queued into the first map, which happened to be Clintar, Symbiotic Surface, and we were on the attack. We made it our mission to take the point and roll the enemy team. The whole time I spent walking out of spawn was me admiring Dagger's ass, which at this point shouldn't surprise anyone. We dealt with the diving Spider-Man in our backline and slowly worked our way up to the point where I managed to heal my team enough to secure us the point. I was definitely still learning how to swap between the characters, and I accidentally swapped a couple times without meaning to, but I managed to hold on and cover my teammates with the help of my Jeff. We practically rolled the enemy team to the first checkpoint, not meeting any resistance as we made our way. Some of the team was off fighting on the side, but most of us were able to stick to the cart and glide along most of the way, and a good Dr. Strange ult made sure that we could secure the kills on the people who happened to be on the cart before we hit the next checkpoint. This was the last stretch until our possible victory, and we managed to get pretty far without issue. The enemy team gave us a lot of space to work with, and we slowly pushed our way up with plenty of time on the clock. We didn't have much conflict, and any we did encounter was either eliminated or fled the scene. I suffered through a bit of lag here and there, but eventually I made it work. We got stuck a little bit on the last stretch, definitely getting locked around the last corner by a couple well-placed ults by the enemy team. But I persevered, healing my team to the best of my abilities while still having no idea what I was doing and my Pookie absolutely carrying. We ended up winning the game after being stuck for about 2.5 minutes at that point, and we finally managed to capture the last checkpoint and win the game with 1 minute and 46 seconds remaining. The whole game took less than 10 minutes, and before I knew it, I was staring at the MVP screen where my Pookie was displayed in 4K, as she deserves. If I thought my first ever game went well, this next one went even better. We were on Spider Islands, the Tokyo 2099 convoy map, and off rip, I was already hovering over the supports to see who I would need to play. We had 2 duelists already, and I didn't want to burden anyone else by playing the role. But my Pookie was the GOAT, locking in Mantis, and later swapping to Adam Warlock, letting me lock in Scarlet Witch. We were on the defensive, meaning that it was our job to stop the payload from making it to the end of the map. If I'm being entirely honest, the first point started off pretty weirdly. Our whole team was either dying or dead, and we were constantly staggering our way back to the point. The enemies managed to push up almost the entire way, but our team was able to hold them off for a couple of minutes, only losing 1 or 2 of us at a time. But we remained ahead of the game for a couple of minutes, keeping the enemies pushed back even after Iron Fist's sneaky attempt at a back cap. We kept fighting the enemy team on this point, slowly pushing back the cart, when I had the wonderful idea to hide like a bitch for our next team fight. There were only 3 of our teammates, including myself, on the point, so I waited for the enemy team to push up the cart a little bit before using my massive knowledge of this game, crafty intuition, and pure skill to hit a singular button, killing 4 of the enemies and hitting the 5th with my super laser piss. I thought that at this point we were victorious, but I was wrong. The enemy team managed to slowly make their comeback onto the point and managed to cap while we were in overtime. The attackers managed to push up the cart quite a bit, but we were able to take it back after a few minutes or so and keep the enemy team on the defensive, with them staggering quite a bit from time to time and giving us the advantage. They managed to regain the cart though, and unfortunately, I absolutely whiffed my second ultimate and died embarrassingly. The attackers managed to cap the second checkpoint off that, and we only had about 2 minutes to stop them from reaching the end. But the enemy team couldn't keep pushing up forever, and we managed to hold them off without much difficulty. As they were stretching around the last curve of the map, with only 17 seconds left on the clock, I popped another ultimate that led to Nothing, since everyone on the cart had already died to the hands of my Psylocke while I was in the wind-up stage, but miraculously, we won. While the victory screen rolled out, it shifted into the MVP screen with my wonderful name plastered there, letting the whole match know that by playing the easiest character in the game, I managed to achieve an MVP and claimed my spot at the top of the leaderboard. And for those of you who are curious, my highlight was, in fact, my 4K ult and super laser piss. I felt the sense of accomplishment as I stared at the screen with my MVP plastered above my head. It felt really good to know that I wasn't complete booty cheeks at the game, and even though the enemy team had put up a good fight, mine was better. When competitive had finally dropped in the game and was accessible to all players, my duo decided to queue up a game. Without my consent, mind you, and threw us into an absolute shit show. Hopping into the game, we were immediately swamped with the realization that everyone had locked in a character just as I was done loading in. We had 2 duelists and 2 strategists, leaving the tank role unfulfilled. I'm going to say this as is. In Overwatch 1 and 2, I never really played tank. I never really felt comfortable with the role, and I was too lazy to figure out how to play it efficiently. My go-to tank was always D.Va, but I never actually played her that much since I was always on Mercy or Ana. Not to mention that in the sequel, the tank role was impossible to play without feeling like an alternative punishment to solitary confinement. It was okay in 6v6, but when they took away that second tank, the game was unplayable, so I never really touched the role in Overwatch 2 unless I was feeling a little silly goofy or wanted to see Ramatra's sexy body. Anyways, feeling obligated to fill the role, my Pookie and I both queued up different tanks. I went as Penny Parker, and as far as I can remember, that was my first time ever playing that character. The only other character I've experienced playing is Venom, and that was a singular game where I did nothing. We loaded into Shin Shibuya, one of the Tokyo 2099 maps, and got ready for a fight. Our team was on the attacking side first, meaning that we needed to capture and move the payload as far as we could push it. Preferably, we would have liked to have pushed it towards the end of the map and gotten all 3 checkpoints. But I'm sure you can tell that didn't happen. It took us a while, but we managed to finally capture the cart. I was still learning what Penny actually did as a character, which wasn't a good sign when we were in a competitive match. I was getting some kills, and I was definitely mitigating damage, but unfortunately, that wasn't enough to stop our opponents, and they managed to bring our time into OT and to force us off the cart about halfway to that first checkpoint. I'm sure you could probably tell what happened after we switched sides, but we practically got steamrolled. I wouldn't say it was instantaneous, but they managed to cap the first point pretty early on. Definitely a lot sooner than our team did while on attack. Our defense wasn't the greatest also, which was definitely not helped by my complete cluelessness when it comes to playing tanks. We fought really hard, but unfortunately, we were not the better team, and as hard as we tried to stick the point, we eventually ended up C9ing and giving the enemy team the victory. That game wasn't really fun, as I was stressed and still learning, and I still hold the grudge against my duo for queuing us into that without me knowing initially. If I knew that was going to be the case, I would have been ready to lock in Jeff instantly. Communication is the key to success, Nathan. I don't have much to say about the competitive scene in general, especially because I only played 1 game in the bottom rank, so for my sake as well as your own, take everything I say with the greatest salt here. Primarily, I think that there should be a timer before you can lock in characters. When my duo and I got into the game, all the other players had already locked in their characters. We barely made it to the select screen portion of the match, and already everyone else had locked in their characters. There was no room for discussion or the chance that we could talk about who would play who. I feel like my biggest issue is that there's no such thing as role queue in this game. It's open queue all the way through, meaning that no one can choose which roles they want to play and might feel obligated to fill on someone they're not used to. I was in that situation, where I would have preferred to play a strategist or even a duelist rather than a vanguard, but because we didn't have a tank, that obligation fell on me and my duo, and in order to keep the same advantage, we both had to queue up the role. Maybe add role queue as a separate competitive mode like Overwatch does? I don't know, but I would like to see something like it in the game. Another thing that I noticed, and something my Pookie confirmed and found more information about, was that there's a hero pick ban system in the game. But it was weird because there was no option to choose which characters we could ban. But I know that I've seen it before, as many of the YouTubers that I've watched had the ability to choose heroes to ban while they were playing competitive. Well, there's apparently a reason for that. See, you can't have access to this ban system in low elo. You have to be diamond or above in order to access that option. And yeah, I can understand why that would be the case. In higher elo, you have a better understanding of the game, and I think being able to ban certain heroes in those ranks makes sense because they know how to counter that, whereas in lower elo, people might just pick the characters that they don't know how to fight against rather than something that completely messes up their composition. I still don't think it's fair that it's an option only for higher elo, but I digress. I can see the argument for both sides. I've played quite a few characters in the game at this point, and even though there are some that I have yet to touch, I wanted to give my opinions on the ones that I've played a bit. I know some characters either look super intimidating or super boring, and I want to assure you that no matter how simple or complex the kit, these characters are a ton of fun. I don't really think there's been a situation where I haven't enjoyed playing a character. The only one I can think of was when I queued up competitive for the first time, and you all know how that turned out. But simply locking in characters to simply try them out was a lot of fun, and I had a great time figuring out what everyone does. Again, these are just the characters I've played more than once and found enjoyable, and as always, these are my opinions. I was both scared and excited when I learned that Black Widow was a sniper. I got flashbacks to the original Overwatch 1 Widowmaker, who had 0 damage drop off and the ability to one-shot any squishy. But luckily, none of my fears were warranted because Black Widow is an entirely different character despite being so similar. First, her weapon is completely different. It has 8 bullets in it, and no matter who it is you shoot at, you are unable to one-shot a full health target. Sure, as long as they have a tiny bit of damage done to them, they are able to die from a Widow headshot. But I think that's what makes her really strong. She's great for picking off damage and letting your allies deal with their remaining health, or it allows you to take shots at people who already have a ton of damage done to them, allowing you to secure the kill for your team. I think her gun is really cool since when you aren't ADSing, it still does the same amount of damage for quite a long range. This means that if you're able to land a headshot on anyone who's approaching you, you will be able to quickly take them out and you don't need to ADS in order to hit that shot. I also really like that she has her batons as a secondary weapon, which allows her to have a tiny bit of a melee weapon that doesn't do a ton of damage, but does a tiny bit more than your normal melee. I think it was a really good addition since if someone tries to run up on you and you land the aforementioned headshot, you can quickly switch up weapons and kill them easily without having to worry about hitting your second shot. Her kit is super simple since the only 2 abilities besides her ultimate include a sprint that allows her to jump a little higher and a kick that allows you to knock back enemies and pull yourself closer to do extra damage to them. Her ultimate is also a giant stun which slows enemies and allows you to pick them off easier. It also does a tiny bit of damage. The character is definitely frustrating, as a lot of characters are easily able to get behind you, and if you have even the slightest mistake in your positioning, you can get really messed up by the enemy team. But I think she also has enough drawbacks to make her extremely balanced. It also doesn't help that her hipfire is a pump action, meaning that it takes the exact amount of time to reload her next bolt into her gun as it would if she was ADSing. I also like the fact that even though she has what I would call a sniper rifle, she's more of a marksman. I think Hawkeye actually fits more into the sniper category, which I feel is extremely accurate for him and his character, but that does leave Black Widow as a little bit of an odd dog out. I might be incredibly bad at Black Widow, but I always had a lot of fun playing her when I wasn't getting dove on every other second. I think that she's a great character, and you can easily negate the flaws of her weapon if you know how to use her kit's utility. Cloak and Dagger is probably the most interesting character in terms of playstyle, in my opinion. This character is actually 2 separate characters that you can alternate between, similar to how other characters can alternate between different guns. You have Cloak, who is your oppressive force on the field, and Dagger, who is your healer. I absolutely loved playing this character, as their kit was very simple and translated over really well between the 2. On one hand, both characters have a left click that deals damage, but Dagger can also heal her teammates. They both have a wall that they can push forward, and while Dagger has one that heals, Cloak has one that blinds enemies and does a tiny bit of damage. If with the right clicks, that's the only big difference that the characters have. Dagger could throw out a couple daggers that creates a small area of healing, and Cloak can use his right click to make allies in his radius temporarily invisible to enemies. I really like that despite the characters having different abilities, they still stay relatively the same in terms of appearance and functionality. It makes it really easy for me to understand what the characters did, especially because if you gave both of them an entirely different kit, it would be incredibly confusing and probably extremely overpowered. Keeping the abilities similar but the effects different was a very smart decision by the dev team. I had a lot of fun on Cloak and Dagger whenever I would play them, and it was always so rewarding to be able to deal decent damage on Cloak while also doing incredible healing on Dagger. I also like that her healing daggers track allies, making it a lot easier for you to heal them. Swapping between the 2 forms was also something that I found was really interesting and easy to do after a while, and I was able to be both a healer and an oppressive force on the field, and it usually made me one of the higher priority targets by the enemy team. Either way though, the character was a lot of fun to play. Jeff is an absolute menace on the field, and I absolutely love him. His difficulty rating is 1 out of 5 stars, making him one of the simplest characters to play, especially because he only has 2 abilities besides his ultimate. He has the ability to spit out these little healing bubbles that, whenever an ally touches them, grants them a little bit of health, and he also has his dive ability which allows him to merge himself into the ground and swim around, making him harder to hit and allowing him to climb walls. Despite him being such a simple character, I have to say that I have had some of the most fun on the game playing Jeff the Landshark. He's actually become one of my most played characters in quick play. And what's not to love about him? He's a baby fucking shark with tiny legs and toe beans. Utilizing his kit was such a break from the other characters that have multiple abilities that I have to keep track of. Sometimes I just want to turn off my brain and allow myself to have fun with the game, and Jeff is such a great character to fill that role. I don't feel the need to perform or do a million risky stunts because there isn't much that I can do, and that left me with only the option of having fun and enjoying the character. Once I got used to the character, most of my time on him went from me trying to obtain a match MVP to me constantly clip farming by ulting an area and suicide diving off the side of the map. It often led to either a good clutch, funny moment, or an absolute C9 from me. I actually started my time playing Mantis not enjoying the character, but I eventually grew to really like Mantis and added her to my arsenal. Her kit is extremely simple, and it relies on these 4 life orbs that she has, but I'm going to call them leaves because they're shaped like leaves. I didn't like this mechanic at first since she only had a limited amount of healing she could do before it had to recharge, unlike other characters who had to reload and it only took them a second. But I ended up adjusting to it only after playing her a couple times, and my initial hesitation faded away. All of her kit is dependent on her leaves, and they allow her to either damage boost herself or an ally, or it allows her to heal her team. She only has 4 leaves at a time, and the way you can recharge them is either waiting for them to charge naturally, or deal damage, which charges them faster. I found that the easiest way to use Mantis was for me to constantly be using my self-damage boosty damage, so that way I could get my leaves back faster and allow myself to heal my teammates. If I wasn't in the middle of a fight, I would rather be inspiring my teammates who might be closer to the front lines, or simply doing some last-minute healing. Mantis can't shoot her allies to heal them, like Cloak and Dagger or Luna Snow, so her whole healing relies on those 4 leaves. Luckily, I found a perfect balance between everything, and I managed to do quite a bit of damage to keep my healing in my back pocket at all times. Sometimes it would be hard when you'd use your leaves on all your teammates and you'd still have someone who is low, but it's just a matter of prioritizing who your target is going to be, whether it's for attacking or healing. Mantis is definitely a character who I pick when Jeff isn't available and I want a simple game. While she does take a lot more skill to reach a higher output, she's really good at being a character you can play while scrolling through TikTok on your phone, and I really like her for that simple but effective kit. Scarlet Witch is another character that is only 1 out of 5 stars on the difficulty scale. She's super simple and easy to get the hang of, and manages to be fun despite her simplicity. When I first saw the trailers as well as the early alpha and beta gameplay for Scarlet Witch, I was absolutely certain that she'd be one of the characters I would be maining as I continued my journey through the game. If you think there's a catch to that statement, there's not. I absolutely love the simplicity of her kit, but I like that it's not just a couple abilities. She's pretty similar to Moira, having 2 phases that allow her to get in and out of situations easily. She also has a CC ability where she can stun her enemies and lock them in place for a moment, allowing you to get a good damage off. Her ult fire is charged using her primary fire, and instead of it being a singular beam that slowly damages her enemies over time, it does a nice bit of damage as a projectile. And don't even get me started on her ultimate. Despite its slow wind-up time, which limits her mobility, that thing is a nuclear fucking bomb. If you can manage to get yourself above point unnoticed and you pop that thing, anyone who's there will be annihilated. I really like Scarlet Witch because whenever I play her, I feel like I don't need to hold back completely. Her get out of jail free cards make it easier for me to try and take fights while also managing to create distance should I need it. It was also cool trying to see how many people I could get in her ultimate, and pairing that up with a good Groot ult made for some really nice plays. My first time playing Squirrel Girl outside of the practice range was out of spite when someone locked in Black Widow before I could. But I can't lie, despite the difficulty level being a 1 out of 5, I had a lot of fun with the character. I think that a lot of people underestimate her kit. Despite her having a really nice jump into an acorn that can stun enemies, not a lot of people lock in the character, but she has quite the amazing kit. She has the ability to completely refresh her cooldowns, except for her ultimate, and her kit is one giant amalgamation of CC. Not to mention that her primary weapon, her slingshot, does insane damage and ricochets off walls, meaning you can hit people behind cover as if you were Sigma from Overwatch. Surprisingly, I felt like a really big, oppressive force on the field. If I was able to take high ground, I could easily use the projectile aspect of my weapon to do some serious damage. I also had pretty decent mobility, meaning that I was able to get out of a lot of sticky situations without too much of a hassle. I was too hard to hit, and for some reason I had a really easy time hitting aerial targets despite my weapon being a projectile. I think all the time I spent on Kiriko has finally paid off. There were definitely a couple other characters that I played, but I didn't play them to the level as I have these characters. I feel like out of all the characters I played, these were the ones that I could give my honest opinion on. There are definitely a bunch of other fun characters out there, such as Storm and Star-Lord, but unfortunately, those characters didn't make it into this video. I implore you to check out the characters yourself and get to know what character makes you feel good about playing the game. There's a character for everyone, and I'm sure you'll be able to find one that suits you just right. Normally, I talk a lot about the cosmetic side of the game, just because I think that it's really important to talk about. Luckily, Marvel Rivals hasn't had a single issue with the cosmetics thus far from my experience. First, I think it's important to talk about the price of cosmetics. The thing about how Marvel Rivals does their cosmetics is that they make a bundle, including a character skin, MVP intro, banner, emote, and spray. They sell this bundle for around 20 or so US dollars, and they sell the skins by themselves for a couple dollars cheaper, making the bundle the more profitable option for both the company and the player. This is something that a lot of companies do, and I'm not going to talk too deeply about this decision in general, but I do like that paying for the skin itself isn't overly expensive and wallet breaking. The game practically convinces you to get the bundle for an extra couple of dollars, and it costs as much as a normal Overwatch skin without the bundle. So, in a lot of ways, it's cheaper than other games who sell the base skin alone for $20. But one thing I think is really worth it about paying $20 for skins is the quality of the skins. I will die on this hill, but this game has some of the best skin designs I have seen thus far in any game. Not only are the original character designs for the game goated, but they've taken the designs from other forms of Marvel media and added those as purchasable cosmetics. I remember someone mentioning that the skins they were going to add to the game would be ones that exist in the MCU as well as previously in comics, and maybe even skins for holidays or popular themes. I think this is a great route to go down because it keeps it simple and to the point while also giving a very large pool to choose from, since a lot of the characters have a lot of designs. Not to mention that the designs from the comics are absolutely insane, and I'm so down to get more of those. There's so many skin designs that there's bound to be multiple for each character, even as the comics continue to come out. But just in general, the skins in this game look fantastic. I don't have any issues with them, and they're all such high quality while staying true to the character that it represents. Again, I've been over cosmetics for multiple games, so I'm keeping this one short. But I better see Leather Bondage Bucky Barnes come very soon. With my overall thoughts and opinions on the game, I have quite a bit to say, but I'm going to try to keep it brief and only talk about some of the first things that came to mind. If I say any more, this part of the script would be a lot more than 3 pages. To start, I really like the way that the game is set up. It feels really nice and just looks clean. The UI for the home screen, the hero profiles, and even in-game is so neatly organized, and I really like how it feels. The screen is never really cluttered, which I think a lot of games struggle with. Instead, it has just the right amount of busyness to make it look full, but it's neatly organized in a way that doesn't make it crowded. Again, I think this also occurs with the UI in-game as well. With that being said though, I think that the coloration of the game is really dull. Everything is really dark and gloomy, and there's not really any saturation to anything. I know that the characters themselves don't really have a lot of color to them, but I do wish there was an option for me to change the saturation of the game so that it could be a little brighter for me. I had some coloring issues where I can't see certain ults that are on the ground because the color blends in or it's not bright enough, and I really think it would be nice to have the option to change that so that way I can make the game look how I want it to look instead of having to do it in editing. I think that the duelist role is a little too full at the moment. No matter what, I know that most of the characters will probably fit into that category, but I would really like to see the characters in different areas as well. I think that we need more characters to be added as a tank or support, and I'd really like to see that happen so that way I don't feel as limited as I currently do with those roles. It's also weird to me, while we're speaking of the characters, that basically all of the Avengers are there, but we don't have a lot of X-Men or any of the Fantastic Four at the moment. I know that we're getting Reed Richards soon, and I'm sure many X-Men will be coming sooner rather than later with the resurgence of X-Men 97. I also want to see characters who aren't really spoken about much. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a character who I think is one that I would really like to see added to the game, even though she's not one that's widely known or regarded. The game does a really good job at adding in characters that not a lot of people know about, and I'd like to keep adding in smaller or more niche characters so that way they can get the recognition that they deserve. Originally, I was going to complain about the game not having any sort of role queue in the game, but I'm actually going to praise the game for its lack of. The issue with the system is not the fact that we don't have role queue. The game doesn't need it. The player base does. People want to play one specific character and refuse to be flexible and diverse with their characters, making them entitled to simply one trick. The rest of the team has to work around, and possibly take the L, because X, Simple Spidey X, has to play Spider-Man every fucking game or else we're all going to get doxxed on Twitter. Now, I understand why people would like a role queue system, since in some ways it has helped Overwatch become better, allowing people to have the opportunity to lock in the roles that they would like to play without having to worry about filling or anything like that. They can play the characters that they want to play and don't have to worry about anything, and I like the system because of that. But I think that Marvel Rivals is in a great spot where it doesn't have to worry about any of it. It doesn't have to worry too much about the balance issues in terms of team composition, and allowing the team to run whoever they want to play is such a great way to bring new team comps to the table and create different playstyles out of that. It really brings out creativity from the team to make them adapt to their situation and team composition, forcing them to try something new to see if they could win. The freedom of being able to play any character you want is something that I really enjoy, and I'm someone who's always been flexible with who they play unless I have to play a Vanguard. I know some people struggle with it since they might be support-only mains, but I think that it isn't as big of an issue as some people say it is. Another thing about competitive that doesn't really pickle my pussy the right way is the fact that hero bans exist in competitive, but only if you are diamond and above. People in lower elo can't get rid of characters and are forced to deal with that one guy who knows how to play Spider-Man in their backlines while their supports are still trying to learn what their E ability does. I understand why it's a thing, and I won't re-explain everything. I still don't think it's fair that lower elo people don't have the same rights as higher elo people. That just feels like a virtual version of the American social class system. Going back to another thing I like is how the tabs of the game are set up, specifically the ones for the heroes. I don't have an issue with this at all, and I think it's really interesting how each character's page works. Of course, you have your hero overview as well as a selection for cosmetics. You also have a tab for their abilities and their lore, as well as your proficiency with them. I think this layout is really nice and is super clean, as it allows for you to easily access different parts of the character. Everything is together and it just looks amazing. I think that the way it's set up reduces a lot of the visual clutter that other games have, and it makes it look more professional and appealing. Some other games really struggle with reducing what's on the screen, and I think this game does a fantastic job at keeping everything organized and not looking like a piece of shit. I also really like how the character has cool intro whenever you click on them. Even though you could skip it, I never do. It's just such an interesting touch that other games don't add, and I feel like it makes viewing the page more interesting. I do have an issue with the game's cosmetics, but this is like the only issue that I have with them. The thing is, when you buy a bundle, you get a skin and an MVP animation that goes with it, but you can't use a skin from one bundle and pair it with an MVP screen from another. You must use the MVP screen that correlates with its respective skin. For example, if I am using Jeff's Incognito Dolphin skin, I can't pair that with his How Ice Sculpting Works MVP screen. It's incredibly stupid that I can't interchange either of those. I don't know why it's a thing, and I think that it would be an easy fix to make so that I can use any skin I want with any MVP screen I want. I would like to think that it's just a tech issue that the devs don't know how to solve yet, and I'm really hoping that's the case. But it doesn't do that for emotes or banners or sprays. All of those are able to be used no matter what cosmetic you're repping. I don't want to keep complaining or praising, so I'm only going to cover one more piece of criticism that I have. I think that on the MVP screen, both your mouse and chat should disappear. I don't like seeing it when I'm trying to look at my cute little shark boy fall in the water. I don't want to see the chat screen unless I hit the enter button, which I never do because I don't want to see the chat screen. Who am I going to talk to on the enemy team? Everyone's already pissed that I'm playing the little guy and not fucking Mantis. I don't want to see my teammates type in GG easy when we were at overtime on the third point because both teams had 99% and we were fighting for the last percentage of the last point. I don't want to see my teammates typing shit to the enemy team when they were 2-14, and I have to watch them rub it in the enemy's face that our team was better when it was a 5v6. I simply want to watch my funny little guy on my funny little screen. I also think you should be able to skip MVP screens just so you can get out of the game easier, and even maybe be able to leave the game when the victory or defeat screen is up as well. There's nothing else I really have to say, and I've really only given criticism that's me nitpicking at the game since I don't want to go after it too hard for it just coming out. I think that if the bigger issues that I have with the game aren't solved within the next couple of weeks to the next month, maybe at the end of January, I might say something about it. But for now, that's all I have. Overall, I think there's a lot of smaller things that I would like to see as well, but I won't get into that. I think the main things I want to see are just simple improvements to the game, more things for us consumers to enjoy, and more quality of life changes that make the game flow easier, although I don't think that's necessary right now. I think that the game is in a really good spot for what we've been given. The game hasn't even been out for a month at the point of my script writing, so I'm hoping that as it continues to make waves in the gaming community, they add more to the game for us to enjoy. But right now, I'm thankful for what we've been given. As the game continues to progress and move on with its life, I think there's a lot of things that I would want to see the game take into consideration and maybe implement. By no means do I mean the game has to do it tomorrow, but I think that in the future it could be beneficial or simply nice to see some different things. With the game being so new, I'm going to give it a bit of a pass on certain topics, and I won't touch too deeply on ones that are extremely obvious, but I will be touching on them nonetheless. The first thing that I want to see as the game progresses is more characters being added. 33 is a great starting point, better than a lot of other games, and I am in no way complaining about the number of characters we have now. However, Marvel is a very large IP, with so many more characters in it that we could ever imagine. I'd really love to see a bunch of different characters outside of the ones that are already planned. I know we're getting Reed Richards and Deadpool soon, as well as Blade, but there are other characters that I think would be really cool to finally have in the game. I really want to see Rogue and Gambit make their appearance, as well as other X-Men like Nightcrawler or Beast. Another thing that I really want in the game are more vanguards and strategists. With 33 characters out already, the majority of them fall into the duelist category. I want to see more characters be more of a support role, even if it might be hard to make them as such. I really thought about Gambit in this position, actually. I thought that if he had his cards for long range and staff for close range, he would make a really good DPS, but pairing that with the ability to give allies a damage increase using his powers would be super cool and on brand. I think it would also be interesting if he was able to heal his allies, even though it's not something that's actively seen in media, but could be something that could be adapted for him. That was just an idea I came up with on the fly, and I can always expand on that if I need to. I would love to see a lot more comic-inspired skins. There have been a couple in the game that have been inspired from recent renditions of comics, and a lot from the MCU, but I would really like to see some more of the iconic looks make their way back into circulation. During the month of December, you were able to get a Magneto skin through watching a couple hours of Marvel Rivals on Twitch, as well as some other rewards like a nameplate and spray. I always enjoy when games allow you to access certain cosmetics through other mediums, as well as having codes that you can import to get skins for free, such as a certain Iron Man skin that resides as one of my outfits for Stark. There are some cosmetics that exist, but I have yet to see. During the closed alpha of the game, there were 2 skins that I remember existing that didn't transfer over to the full release of the game. Those were both the 2099 Spider-Punk skin and the President Loki skin. I'm sure there were more than that I'm missing, but right now I can't think of any. Either way, these skins no longer exist in the current game. You can't find them on any hero page or in the store. They were gained during some sort of battle pass that was out at the time, but unfortunately they haven't been released to the public in a new pass or anything like that. Hopefully they make a return, and the passes that were exclusive to the people in the alpha weren't only available to those select few. I would really like to see those skins make their way back around the store at some point. We are also getting a winter event that is going to drop out 4 separate cosmetics, one for Venom, Groot, Rocket, and Magic, and a free bonus skin for Jeff. It's also going to drop with a Splatoon-like game mode that is just a 4v4 of Jeffs, which I'm really excited about. This point is one that a lot of people probably won't hear me talk about ever again, but I think that this game could be a huge opportunity for a lot of new and upcoming voice actors and actresses to get into the business. There is going to be a consistent stream of characters who are going to be added, which can lead to a lot of possible jobs for a lot of people and the experience that some people might need. There are already a lot of really big names in the game, such as Liam O'Brien, Travis Willingham, Laura Bailey, Josh Keaton, Troy Baker, and so many other people that are in this game that I just can't remember off the top of my head. Again, all these people are such talented and wonderful voice actors, and it's awesome that they're in this game, but I definitely think that this could be a chance for new people to enter the scene. This game literally has under half of the Critical Role cast on its roster, and it's only a matter of time until they get Matthew Mercer in here as well. I think that with a lot of the current voice actors, some of them come from playing these characters in other media types. I know Liam O'Brien played Doctor Strange in a lot of media, so him being the voice of him in this game was not far off from what I was expecting. But I do think that there could have been some different casting choices. Not in the insulting way of, I don't think these guys are good at the job, but rather in the, wow, I would have really liked to have seen this person in the game because they're so good but so unrecognized. This is my very roundabout way of saying that I will work on my southern accent if you hire me to play Rogue when she releases. I'm not joking, I will do it. I think that a lot of people have been asking a singular question since Marvel Rivals was initially announced. Will Marvel Rivals kill Overwatch? This is a super loaded question that I think deserves a pretty fleshed out answer, but in short, yes, but also no. No, I'm not here to dick ride Marvel Rivals, nor am I here to completely shit on Overwatch as much as I want to, but the direction that Overwatch has been going for the last couple of seasons has really pointed me in the direction for where the game is headed. Let's start with the most glaringly obvious point. Marvel Rivals is fresh. It's a brand new game with brand new characters who have brand new abilities that are a lot of fun to play. Sure, Overwatch just added their tank hero, Hazard, but that's the only new content the game has really had, outside of a new game mode no one cares about and the useless balance changes that I think the devs do because they think it's funny. Nothing is happening in the game. In fact, Overwatch is practically reverting to what it once was back when the game initially released. Marvel Rivals is fresh out the gate, and for what it has given us, it's extremely nice. The game feels like something new came out, and as much as it draws similarities to Overwatch, it doesn't feel like a clone. Sure, some character abilities may be similar, but when I play certain characters, I don't even think about the similarities they have to those Overwatch characters. Bug fixes have already gone out, and I'm sure that the team is slowly working on buffing and nerfing characters to fit their original vision of what they wanted the characters to be, but because the game is so new, they have a lot of time to experiment. A great example of this is actually the team-up feature that I talked about earlier. That is a system that gives characters tiny buffs because they are playing certain compositions, and I really like that it's something fresh in the game. I've never seen another game that does that. Usually character abilities work well with other abilities, but none of them mesh to create something new and advantageous. When Marvel Rivals dropped, they dropped the game to us and told us exactly what we were going to expect. We were getting a couple of maps with a couple different game modes and 33 characters. That's all we were told. We got a release date and what platform it was releasing on, and that was it. Well, that and what we've seen during the testing periods. Us players had no other expectations than what we were told. I didn't go into this game being told that there were going to be 18 cosmetics for each character, only for there to be like 2 or 3 per character. I didn't come into this thinking that there were going to be 12 different game modes to experiment with and try out. Overwatch 2 was a promise in and of itself. The whole reason that the game was created was so they could add in a campaign-based mode that would give a large chunk of the story to the players to experience firsthand, rather than watching a random video or cinematic. They released a couple story mode missions for $15, attaching a Sojourn skin to it just for shits and giggles, before they completely canceled the campaign and ripped a lot of the community off $15. They didn't even offer any refunds to anyone who bought it because they couldn't make good on a promise they made us. That campaign mode was the only reason I got into playing Overwatch again, and unfortunately I stuck around for 12 seasons too many after that. Another reason why the game was created is so that way they could change the format, making the 6v6 turn into a 5v5. So far they stuck with that, but the community has continuously complained about how bad it is to play tank in the current state of the game. The role isn't fun, and while some characters are so much more powerful than others, the devs aren't doing anything to make the game more enjoyable for tank players, but rather they're focused on their efforts on doing useless balance changes to roles and characters that don't need to be touched. They actually brought back Overwatch Classic, which is basically how the game was when it first dropped, which was probably the best state the game has been in. Sure, the Moth meta and one-shot characters are back, but at least I'm not playing against fucking Mauga. I do like that they brought back 6v6 as a game mode, but I hear the game mode was actually what they were using for feedback to see if they should bring back the original format of the game, which makes me wonder why they created Overwatch 2 in the first place. Already, with Marvel Rivals only being out for just over a week, there have already been some quality of life and bug fixes. I don't think any character nerfs and buffs have gone out yet in live patch notes since the game came out, but I know that they did some editing to characters while it was in the alpha and beta period. I take that as a huge win, since as soon as they were aware of a problem, they made it a priority to fix any issues that were happening, whether it be with cosmetics or maps. I like that these changes have been made, and it really shows me that the devs are paying a lot of attention to the game, which I'll touch on later. This main point is for Overwatch. Overwatch tries to drop a bunch of updates and changes that are supposed to be quality of life changes, but end up making me want to end my life instead. There are a lot of useless buffs and nerfs that characters go through, and I don't think the devs actually understand why certain characters are doing good and others aren't. The Overwatch devs keep touching characters that do not need to be touched. I think that if they keep inadvertently buffing Mauga and Orisa, those are going to be the only 2 tanks played. I know many Reinhardt players who would love to have their time to shine, but we have yet to get anything out of it. Wrecking Ball is still shit, Winston is still mid as hell, and Mauga is still the tank of choice if you want to get anything done on your team. It's like if you don't lock him in, you're automatically going to lose. The dev team doesn't understand this and keep buffing him. There's a couple more characters that this is the same for, but I'm really pissed about Mauga existing, so this is my excuse. Another example is one that I think is important, and that is the unnecessary health pool and damage output changes. For some reason, the game thought it would be a great idea to change the maximum amount of HP of all the characters, and have been adjusting them since they made the change. The characters were fine where they were because they didn't have the same damage output they had now. The characters were in a great spot, and all of a sudden, them altering the HP pool made it really hard to balance the damage. Basically, if you keep making changes that don't need to be made, you're gonna make things worse. Luckily, Marvel Rivals has yet to do that. One thing I noticed about Overwatch is that I don't think the devs have any idea what's happening with the game. I think that the team really only listens to the content creators and the people who make the team money when they are considering the changes for characters. Not only that, but I don't think the devs actually know how their game works, and they just do stuff without considering the input from the majority of the community and not just the top 1%. The Marvel Rivals devs are really good at their job. Again, they were on top of bug fixes almost immediately, and they did a lot of play testing to make sure that their game was on the right track so it could be what they needed it to be when it dropped. But one thing that tells me the devs care about the game a lot is the fact that they're absolutely cracked at the game. I remember watching a bunch of content creators play against different developers just to see the way they could try out characters and check balancing issues, and the devs were absolutely shitting on these content creators. I don't think I've ever seen a developer that was good at a game they helped create and mold. But this game has proven me wrong in so many aspects, and I really love seeing that the developers care about this game as much as they do, and are willing to play it for hours on end until they become some of the best players just so they know what's happening and how they can make fixes. That type of experience and dedication is something that I love seeing in games. When you don't know how to play your own game, it's hard to make changes for that game. It just makes me feel really good knowing that this game is in really good hands. The last point I really want to drive home is the fact that the tank, or in this game Vanguard, role is actually fun to play. I never played tank in the old Overwatch game because I was bad at it, and when I tried it in the sequel, I was absolutely miserable. There was nothing fun about playing a tank in that game, just because you got fucked over so much and it was your job to frontline or dive or peel and to do everything for your team while you got focused on by the entire enemy team and went down in half a second. Losing that second tank was really the catalyst for the role going to shit. I don't know if the devs realized that the reason no one has fun on the game is because there's no second tank to appeal for you or your team, and that automatically you are outnumbered because there is one of you, but I digress. There's definitely a lot of people who are better at Overwatch than me who can explain why having two tanks is better than having one, but I'm not going to get into that. I highly recommend you check out GS Raider, someone who makes rant videos about Overwatch, and he talks a lot about the tank issue and both sides of the situation without strictly debating if 6v6 was better than 5v5. I think he mentioned that he was switching over to Marvel Rivals or something, but I could be wrong. Either way, check out some of his past videos because he gives some really good insight into the situation. One thing that I absolutely love about this game is that tank isn't unbearable to play. Granted, I still don't play the role because I'm not comfortable with it, but playing the role isn't absolutely cheeks. It's mildly engaging and doesn't feel like a death sentence every time you walk out of spawn. In fact, even though it's a 6v6 game, you can still get away with only having one tank and it not being an issue. The only issue there really is if your team doesn't run a tank, and in competitive, it's just a huge disadvantage that's going to end up having you lose RR. Again, I'm not extremely knowledgeable on playing tank, but when I played the role here, I didn't feel like it was the end of the world outside of the one competitive game I played. Playing a tank in quick play was a lot of fun, and I didn't feel like I was getting fucked over every 5 seconds. I think that when you have a game that has such a similar principle to one you're making, it's really easy to learn from those mistakes that game made and use those mistakes to help influence the decision you make for yours. Overwatch's flaws have been on display for years for the world to see, and people constantly make criticism about it because the game has so much wrong with it. Because of all this negative feedback that Overwatch gets, I think it's really easy for similar games to take that feedback and implement it into their own game. That way they don't have to worry about making wrong decisions. Someone else has already made the mistake, and now the newcomer already knows what to avoid. But I don't even think that the whole issue is Overwatch being wrong about everything. That game has been on its way out for a while, and it's gotten stale. People want something new and fresh, and I think that this game has the potential to be that. In fact, I think it has the potential to be more than what Overwatch ever was. Marvel Rivals pulls from the Marvel IP, and Marvel has been out since 1939. I'll save you guys from doing the math, but Marvel was created about 77 years before Overwatch came into play. Marvel has so many generations of fans, and the game that is based off of something that's been out for almost 90 years is bound to gain the attention of more than 1 or 2 generations. Overwatch is a completely new concept with completely new characters, and with that, it only pulls the attention of people who are into that type of game. At the time, that was probably my generation and maybe the one before me, so people in their early 20s to early 30s. That is such a smaller demographic, and with people losing interest in the game already, the player count is already going down. Again, that's not the only reason why Marvel Rivals is thriving, but is definitely a factor. But Marvel keeps everything interesting, making new TV shows and new comics and new merchandise to keep new generations engaged. They made the characters relatable to the point where people can identify with them, which keeps them engaged. The whole purpose of Spider-Man, for example, is the fact that anyone can wear the mask. Spider-Man can be you, it can be me, it could probably be my dog, but the fact that this could be any person resonates with a lot more people than trying to relate to a cyborg ninja who was killed by his brother or a British chick. Competition is great for games, as it makes the other party strive to be better so that it retains their player base and therefore its monetary income. There's nothing wrong with Marvel Rivals being similar to Overwatch, but at the same time, it's completely different. It's up to us to understand that those differences are what make these games engaging to certain people. So yeah, I think that this game could definitely put the spotlight on Overwatch to see how it combats the sudden popularity of this game, but I'm not sure it will kill it entirely. Overwatch is old, even if Marvel is older, but Marvel Rivals is a baby taking its first step in the gaming industry, while Overwatch is an easily full-grown adult with a 9 to 5, even if the players don't have one of those. Even if I hate Overwatch with a burning passion, I really wish it the best. Stepping away from it really made me realize how the game wasn't healthy for me, and hopefully it can get better. I think Marvel Rivals has the chance to be one of the biggest competitors Overwatch has ever seen, and hopefully it overtakes it one day, since this game deserves all of the recognition it can get. But Overwatch doesn't have Jeff, so it's gonna be a hard battle. And that's my overall opinion and experience with Marvel Rivals. I have to say, I have a pretty big erection right now. This game is so good, and I genuinely didn't think it was going to be as nice of a ride as it has been. I'm hoping that the honeymoon phase of this game never leaves me, because as much as I do get frustrated with how some of my games turn out, I still want to queue up another game after. It's one of the only games where playing it doesn't feel like a chore, and I really hope that they continue on the route that they're going, where it never feels like that. I really want this to be the game that I fall in love with and use as the background for all of my future videos. Remember, Marvel Rivals is free to play on PlayStation, Xbox, and Windows, so feel free to give it a try. I won't keep you captive here anymore since I've kept you long enough. If you like this video, consider leaving a like and maybe subscribe to the channel. I also implore you to leave a comment about your thoughts and opinions on the game. I'd love to hear what you guys would have to say about your experiences playing it or on the video itself, and I try to respond to as many comments as I can. That card that I mentioned earlier should be on screen now. Anyways, this has been Schlorpa, and I'm going to go into some comp games on Jeff.